Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Alfie Whattam podcast. Thank you all for joining. Thank you all for subscribing on Spotify. As always, we are sponsored by welovealpha.com. If you're an engineering manager looking to grow your team, then go to welovealpha.com to hire your next software developer, from Java to C# to Python to React to Angular and all of the technologies. Basically, we've got the developers that you need to grow and scale your business. Today on the podcast, we are joined by Jan. Jan, could you just start by giving us a 30-second intro, mate? Tell us who you are, what your background is, and what your kind of expertise lies in.
Cool. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, very excited to be here. I was actually trained as a scientist, so I was trained as a biochemist. I read biochemistry and didn't do software engineering very much until later on in my career. Then I kind of pivoted. I went to work in the US for a tech company, biotech company, kind of in between. Went back to the UK, did my PhD. I worked a little bit for the U.S. government at the NIH. That was kind of exciting. Like, you can get on the plane with like this plastic badge without your passport. It's kind of very strange. And then I came back. Yeah, then I came back, started my own company. That was very exciting. And now I work for another startup. Like, I'm definitely like a startup person. Did some consultancy along the way as well.
Okay, awesome. And that would have been surreal, getting onto a plane without a passport, I imagine. Did you get like a weird stare, or did they know what was going on?
No, they know it's like a totally valid form of ID. Within the US, you show your like government ID, it's a special plastic badge, and they're like, "Yeah, correct. Yeah, let's just go ahead."
That's cool, man. Power play right there. That's cool. Well, I've got a few articles to talk about today with you. Definitely in your area in terms of research, in terms of kind of medtech and deep learning in that realm. So, without further ado, let's go into them. So, news in the States, as you mentioned about the US. So, new White House directive will require free access to studies funded by tax dollars. So, a new White House directive will require academic journals to provide immediate access to papers that are publicly funded. Announced on Thursday, the policy, which will be phased in over the next several years, will end a rule that has allowed publishers to keep tax-financed publications behind a paywall for 12 months. So previously, only research funded by federal offices with R&D expenditures of $100 million or more had to be published in open access, as per 2013 guidance. But the new directive applies to nearly all agencies, about 400 in total. New York Times estimates, and also requires that publications be made available in machine-readable formats to ensure easy reuse. Probably quite big news in the research world in the US. This is obviously an area that you understand quite well. Jan, what do you think about this kind of policy change?
Yeah, this is a really great topic. Like I think you mentioned that like you had somebody from Elsevier like a few episodes back, right? So this is like a very interesting conversation. It's been going on in the research field for many years now. I think in the interest of your listeners, I'll give like a little bit of context, because it's kind of like this research publication thing is actually kind of crazy. Like if you know and you know about it if you're a researcher, but if you're not, it's like a big surprise to people. So suppose you're working on like some cure for malaria or like some other disease, and you've done your research and you want to publish a paper, right? So to publish this paper, you have to like, and the research you've done was either paid by like a charity in the UK. This could be like Cancer Research UK, or the Wellcome Trust, or the government. Like you got your money from either the taxpayer or from a charity. Yeah. And so you paid for all the people in your lab and all of your equipment in the lab from that money. And then once you have your findings, you found your breakthrough drug for malaria, you want to go and publish that, right? You have to pay a journal to publish in them, right? That's kind of okay. That's kind of fair enough, right? But this is just the beginning of the journey, right? So they take your money and they send the paper out for review. This review is done by other researchers voluntarily, completely free of charge. So like highly educated people do this completely free of charge on this like honor system and review your work, like read it in depth. They don't necessarily try to they don't have the time to validate your findings.
Sure.
This could take months, right? But they read it very, very carefully and spend often days, hours, like a lot of time reviewing a paper. And then, the paper gets, and they do this for free, right? The publisher just sends this out to them and they do this for free. And the paper is online And if you want to access this, or me, or like, from where I am now, just open the paper online, we have to pay the journal. So like they just like it's
Oh
triple,
man.
triple. It's unbelievable, right? So people started to revolt against this. Many in the
Okay.
UK, this has already been the case for many publishers, that you have to your work has to be open access, has to be accessible to others.
Sure.
You had places like Archive that host your stuff for free for you if you're a researcher. Yeah.
Was this, do you think, just a financial thing, like a way to make money, or is there another reason why it was behind a paywall? Or
I don't want to speak for the publishing
sure.
companies. From a point of view of a researcher, like there was yeah, personally, there was quite a little value added from their side. There was a lot of prestige though. So like the prestige effect and the network effect, like if you're published in a prestigious journal, that's like obviously like considered good. It matters if you're a researcher. It matters when you're applying for further grants to have publications in these prestigious journals, right? So the system is kind of the system is kind of weird like that. I think it's quite hard to understand looking from the outside how it works.
Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting. I'm surprised, when I read this article, I'm surprised this wasn't like the norm already, because if you're a researcher, surely you want as many people as possible to see your findings and your work. But you said in the UK they already have something like this set up. Is it the same as what the US is, in that it's now going to be free, or is it something different? Or
Yeah, that's a good question. I've been out of it for a few years, so I don't want to like mislead
sure.
people. I don't remember, but I think it was dependent on your funding body. So whoever provided the money for your breakthrough research, like that person kind of said, like, listen, if we're giving you money, this cannot be part of this game. Some fields, I think I should give a shout out to like certain fields. Like people in fields like physics or math, like math caught on to this very early, and like they were like, no, 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 we're not doing this. This is just gonna, like, computer science. Same for computer science was like, we're not gonna be doing this trap. The people in kind of the life sciences, the biology, chemistry, medicinal sciences, they definitely got trapped more into this hamster
Okay.
wheel of these paywall journals.
That's weird. When my wife did her PhD and published her thesis, I remember her going through this process and having to pay cash to get it all. I think the university funded it in the end, but yeah, wild industry and interesting way of doing it. But good to see that it's no longer behind a paywall, and that it's getting better in that
For sure.
respect. Yeah. Next article, research-y, but more related to kind of your other expertise in kind of the med and health tech domain. So, Moderna sues Pfizer, shocking, over our mRNA technology used in COVID vaccines. So, Moderna is suing Pfizer and BioNTech over patents. It said it filed years ago on the life-saving technology. They said on Friday that it's suing them, alleging that the companies copied its mRNA technology, the revolutionary vaccination method used in Pfizer and Moderna's COVID-19 vaccines. So between 2010 and 2016, Moderna said it filed patents that covered foundational mRNA technology that Pfizer and its German partner BioNTech copied without permission in order to make their COVID-19 vaccine. So big news in that respect. Not something that I even will pretend to understand, but obviously a little bit more your expertise. What are your thoughts on this sort of thing happening?
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting how this is going to play out. Like, for context, this is not the first time we're seeing this. Like, every time you have a big breakthrough like this, these legal battles
Yeah.
kind of wage. I'm not an IP lawyer, cannot comment on like, how likely this is to go one way or another, but it certainly is interesting to see that like for all these breakthrough technologies, like this just will almost certainly happen. We've seen this
Yeah.
previously with another big technology called CRISPR. It's a
Yes.
DNA editing technique. You may have heard, right? Like some of the people may be familiar with this, and that also led to like a multi-year legal battle between I think two universities, or like a university and a company. So
Okay.
there was like a lot of legal work happening there.
I had a few CRISPR experts on the podcast before. That is interesting. That's very interesting. It's like genetic engineering. How would you describe that for like a layperson?
Yeah, I think it's fair to call it that, right? It's just
Yeah.
like a very high fidelity technique for making, editing a file on a computer is pretty straightforward. Editing a DNA sequence inside of a living organism, like, oh, I wish it was that easy, right? Like, so,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
this
yeah.
technique allowed people to, with very high fidelity, and introduce like the sequences that they wanted into living organisms, not just simple things like bacteria, but also like a more sophisticated multi-cell creatures. So yeah, this is likely going to be a replicate of that, like many years, lots of legal. But here it's interesting because it's like it's the field is very, very hot and very applied. Like CRISPR at the time, I think had no therapeutic applications. It was just
Okay.
seen as this very promising technique that will be like basic research technique that will like may be applicable therapeutically to kind of help people with diseases. Whereas here, the therapeutic application is very clear, right? Like we've already seen the COVID vaccines come out. There's there's a lot like I can't even like I see it every other day, like mRNA vaccine for like this spar,
Yeah.
like either cancer or like some other disease. I think I've seen like a mRNA vaccine for Lyme disease the other week. Like it's a really booming and like those vaccines for at least for COVID made it like a ton of money. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of commercial interest there. Yeah.
I'm surprised in a way they're suing each other because COVID was the sort of thing that was meant to bring everybody together and work together to make the vaccines and help everybody. But I guess at the end of the day, they are still businesses and they have an obligation to their shareholders and that sort of thing, right? So and as you said, this is not uncommon, right, in that kind of field.
Yeah, definitely. And like it all brought us together, but there was a lot of conversation around like, hey, probably it's sufficient amount of money was made on these vaccines. Maybe we can like open source them. Maybe we can lower some of the patent requirements to allow, developing countries or like countries that cannot just like pay insane amount of money like we can in the West for access to these vaccines. And there was an extremely strong pushback. I mean,
I remember. Yeah, yeah.
extremely strong pushback from this. There's a lot of interest in milking this for all it's worth. It's very interesting. Some of the critique were like, oh no, this is like so complicated to do. We could never do this in these like developing world countries. Like that was just like so far from the truth. It was
Sure.
like
Yeah.
there's only one facility in the world which could make this. Well, there's at least two, one for like this company and the other one for this other company. I don't think it's that difficult, but it was definitely like yeah, very controversial.
Okay, interesting. All right. Final article of the episode. So DeepMind, we were obviously discussing this the other day, Jan, on our pre-call, but DeepMind uncovers structure of 200 million proteins in scientific leap forward. So the success of the AlphaFold program could have a huge impact on global problems such as famine and disease. So AI has deciphered the structure of virtually every protein known to science, paving the way for the development of new medicines or technologies to tackle global challenges such as famine or pollution. Proteins are obviously the building blocks of life. They are formed of chains of amino acids, folded up into complex shapes. Their 3D structure largely determines their function. And once you know how a protein folds up, you can start to understand how it works and how to change its behavior. Although DNA provides the instructions of making the chain of amino acids, predicting how they interact to form a 3D shape was a lot more tricky. And until recently, scientists had only deciphered a fraction of the 200 million or so proteins known to science. However, in 2022, November, the AI group DeepMind announced it had developed a program called AlphaFold that could rapidly predict this information using an algorithm. And since then, it's been crunching and crunching through the genetic codes of every organism that has had its genome sequenced and predicting the structures of the hundreds of millions of proteins they collectively contain. So obviously pretty major news. So a couple of weeks ago now, I think this article came out, but I remember LinkedIn just being like everyone talking about it in kind of the deep learning space. You obviously understand this area well. What are your thoughts on this piece of news?
Yeah. Yeah, no, this is amazing. I mean, like the scientist in me is like on all news around this, like the scientist in me is just like jumping up and down. This is like this is in the last few years in this field, we've seen like more progress than for many decades prior. So it's really amazing and it's very close to our work at Charm. Like we're
Yeah.
trying to to take this work and build upon it. The real question that we're interested in is not just predicting the structure of the protein, but the structure of the protein connected to a small molecule drug,
Okay.
and how we can use this information, to provide novel therapeutics to patients. This is like a real this is like really the holy grail for us. It's very useful to have these protein structures. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to like underscore that, but it's really, really so much more powerful, especially to the patients, if we can try to improve
Yeah.
some of the drug discovery aspects through AI. But there's also like a word of warning here. I want to say, like,
Okay.
this is a very interesting the PR arm of DeepMind
Sure.
is extraordinary, right? But like
I've heard a
as a
few people tell
scientist,
me this now. Yeah, yeah.
as a scientist, I think it would be like intellectually disingenuous to like leave it without a comment. These predictions from the DeepMind's model are just that they're predictions, they're predicted structures. They remain to be experimentally validated. Some of the, like, we will probably never create all these experimental, like we will not experimentally resolve all these protein structures, but I think you as a person working in drug discovery, you would be hard pressed to pick a predicted, AI predicted structure over an experimental structure at this stage. Like maybe 20 years from now, like you would
Yeah.
like the fidelity of the AI predicted structures would be so high. But right now, it's the experiment is king, and the prediction is the prediction is also based on it's trained on experimental data. So that's a really important point to make here, I think.
What does it mean for like the average person walking on the street? Like if the AI is determining all this, and then companies like the business you're working for are using that data and turning it into practical applications for the average person. What kind of therapeutics, what kind of conditions or problems could it help solve? Like what kind of impact could it have on the world in like a practical sense?
That's a very good question, right? People like they're definitely interested in how that's going to translate into their lives. I think the answer is like there is for this technology. I mean, we're witnessing kind of like a Cambrian explosion of companies, such as Charm Therapeutics
Yeah.
in this space, for AI powered drug discovery, with many companies coming onto the scene. Fundamentally, there's no like disease area that's like preferential over another. But basically for kind of business and regulatory reasons, some areas may be more easy to kind of enter. For example, like if you're in oncology,
Yeah.
it seems like the approval process is much faster. So this is where you may see this kind of the patient need is also the highest, right? So like this is where you may see the breakthroughs coming fastest. But that's also true for any other drug discovery method, right? It's not specific to AI. The AI will probably follow a similar path. So that's just like one example where I would expect it.
It's awesome to see like such a positive use of AI, because I get people on the show all the time and they are just scared out their mind about what AI could become, and all it takes is a couple of rogue agents to develop some system which is malicious, and then God forbid if it became self-aware eventually. You had somebody on from Google talking about that recently. I'm sure you saw it in the news. They said their AI had it almost had sentience, like a 6-year-old child, which probably a PR move really, but I'm not sure if we're quite at that point yet. But yeah, but it's great to see AI being used for such a positive impact that could really benefit the world.
Yeah. I mean, working at Charm is like definitely one of the most rewarding experiences professionally for myself, and I suspect for many others on our team. It's tremendously fun. It's very meaningful. Like you're not using your skills to like make somebody's burrito delivery faster, right? Like that's
Yeah.
kind of like not as exciting. I mean, although very important too, but like just like to me, it like the helping provide therapeutics for people is far more. It's a very challenging thing. Like we certainly don't see the AI as this magical bullet. Like there's definitely a lot of like experimental techniques or like other approaches that people have tried, and it's just a very difficult field, right? So I don't want to overpromise that this will be like some fantastic thing that's going to take a lot of work for this to yield human drugs. It takes a decade, I think, to take a drug from an idea to clinic sometimes. So
Yeah.
it's,
We saw with COVID it happened a lot faster though. I mean, there was obviously a ton of pressure for that to happen. But do you think it takes that long because of the amount of R&D, or is it that long because of the amount of government regulation?
it's always a mix, right? Like I would not be, I would caution people to, like, from these like super simple things. Sometimes, sometimes for things like for certain classes of drugs, we really have very, very good existing drugs, right?
Yeah.
So it would be it would just be like not super moral and not really like useful to like approve willy-nilly whatever companies come up with, like, for painkillers or for like heart disease. We have like remarkably good drugs, and the bar should be very, very high to enter that, right? Like you really have to be, people call it being better than the Beatles. Like you really have to be
Yeah.
quite good as a drug. Other areas we certainly, we're certainly seeing like a much faster regulatory framework, like oncology, right? Like where there's like big unmet need, or areas of similar variety where the regulatory bodies are like quite happy to lower the bar because there's such a patient need. There's so many people suffering yeah.
Being better than the Beatles, I'm not sure if that's possible, man. That's a tricky one.
Tough. And indeed, it has turned out to be also in the pharma industry. It's quite hard to be better than some of these drugs.
Yeah. That's cool. It's cool. Well, awesome. Thanks for coming on, Jan. It was awesome to get your opinion on what's happening in these areas. I had no clue what I was talking about, so it's good to get an actual expert that understands this sort of thing. So, everyone check out Jan on LinkedIn, and check out obviously the company. And yeah, thanks everyone for watching. Make sure you're subscribed on Spotify, and see you next time for the next episode. Thank you.